the way I kind of look at it from a marketer's lens, I suppose, is the lights have been continually getting dimmer in the room. And we haven't noticed because they get so subtly dimmer every day. And so you can imagine we just start squinting more. We turn the brightness up on our machine, but eventually the light goes off. And then we're like, oh, I guess I have a problem. I need to change the light bulb or call the electrical company. And with Google finally putting, the deprecation date later this year for all of cookies in Chrome, that's when the light's going to go out.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, entrepreneur, and chief I'm Chief AI Officer at Claritas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we need a little AI to come up with your multiple titles, I think, to reconcile.
Too many things on the plate. So at any rate, Greg, we've got a great guest today, and I know that you've got a big chef's kitchen because I've been to your house before. You've got lots of counter space, and imagine that you have every appliance you need under the sun.
Okay, I don't think there's ever every appliance, but go ahead, keep going. I'm listening. So let's say
I
did have every appliance.
You've got every gadget imaginable.
Okay, there's a few gadgets.
But here's the catch. Here's the catch. None of those appliances were made from the same company or at the same time, and they aren't compatible. Imagine they have different voltages, different plugs. Some need adapters. It's all over the place.
Oh man. So this sucks. That sucks. That's not going to work. It certainly sounds like what the struggle is we're having with data and marketing. But go ahead, keep going.
That's where I'm going with this. Basically, it's really hard to manage all those tools effectively when they don't work together. And it's an analogy that today's guest uses for what his company does. Barry Padgett is CEO of Amperity, a customer data platform or consumer data platform. And they are using the power of AI and machine learning to create more unified customer data for retailers and automotive manufacturers, healthcare people, et cetera. And as he explains, it's really what the Amperity platform does. It's this kind of universal socket for all those different machines and plugs so that you can use the tools together to unify the data across your marketing organization. And it gets better when those things can work together, right? You can actually make your meal. So think about getting your customer loyalty system and your online sales system and your POS at the register and to talk to each other, to complete the picture for each consumer. When and how they spend and for who.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes Barry's company, Amperity, so interesting, Rex. I agree with you, is that their application of AI to really tackle what is probably the most challenging, near challenging, most complex problem that marketers have, which is that, what are you really doing around the future of first-party data, integrating other data, and really sort of supporting their connection to consumers? And granted, there's a lot of uses for that. It could be around sort of acquisition. I think what gets me really excited about Amperity when Barry and I first met a little over a year ago was their focus on customer experiences. And listen, we know from MMA's research that customer experience is the number one, the single greatest driver of financial performance. The strongest marketing strategy is customer experience. And I think it's the one that a lot of marketers sort of like pay homage to, believe in, and want to get to. But boy, that's complex and really hard to do. So
let's bring Gary in and see if he can help us with that. So Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Did we get it right?
You did. You did get it right. And in fact, the outlet analogy, Rex, is so perfect in the sense that it's just easy. We take something really complex and hard, maybe like billions of rows of data from dozens and dozens of systems and lots of use cases and AI and predictive modeling and analytics. We take all that stuff, and if we can boil it down into, wouldn't it be great if we could plug all our appliances across our business into an outlet in the wall that were all over the place and we never thought about it? They were just always on. It was trusted and nourished, and we had the confidence that no matter whether it was to your analogy, a hair dryer or a microwave or a laptop or a crock pot, they were all going to work. And so we love that analogy, in so much as we all have, to your point of sale systems, e-com, digital marketing, contact center and support, loyalty, mobile tools, web tools. We have so many appliances, and we love them around our business. And the challenge is they're not all fueled with the same sort of energy and the same sort of, voltage and wattage and meterage, meaning wouldn't it be great if we could just give all those appliances the thing they need most, which is a single, trustable, always on view of the customer. And if we did that, the tools themselves would probably be pretty magical. And I think when we deploy tools across our businesses, we sometimes give the tool a bad rap when we're not meeting the goals, and oftentimes it's what we're feeding the tool, we're just so hyper dependent on the data these days, and making sure that these tools are getting hydrated with the right view of the customer, so they can go do what they're magical at. And so that's kind of where we spend a lot of time at Amperity, is really obsessing about the quality of that customer data.
So let's go deeper into that because I want to know exactly how AI fits in. Because I think really the core issue is that you end up having different identifiers for a person, and and that creates complexity, right? I mean, multiple email addresses, different names that people go by, or the way that they spell it. I mean, on one credit card I have JREX, on others it's just Rex, etc. You've got all kinds of issues. So how is it that you are using AI beyond sort of the old fuzzy logic? Okay, names are close enough; they seem to match an address or whatever. What's the magic that you're doing that makes it so easy to get that customer view?
Yeah, it's the company was founded on the back of AI, multiple patents as relates to the AI that we've invented and how we deploy it. And essentially, I think you hit the nail on the head. Fuzzy logic is great when we're trying to say, is this Greg or is this Gregory? And it gets
Yeah.
really challenging when we've got 10 different versions of Greg. So now that's a rule that becomes pretty unwieldy, that we're writing in the old fuzzy logic sort of match merge kind of land of unifying data. And then when we start to add the complexity of Greg, which is, he has multiple addresses, he's got lots of different handles he uses in different domains for his email, he's got device IDs, and, like a lot of us, he has multiple devices. He's moved around a couple of times. He's got a household that he shares. And so there are other folks that transact with him, he transacts on behalf of. It gets really complex when you start to add in all those different dimensions of a simple Greg versus Gregory. And so when we use AI, it's two things. One, to handle the volume, because it's just impossible to kind of crunch through this stuff with a bunch of rules. You can imagine a simple rule of looking for Greg or Gregory going across a 200 million customer data set, and maybe 50 or 80 different sources of customer at one location, depending on the number of tools they have. And that job might run over the course of 2 days. And so when you multiply just the variations in customer, the number of source systems, meaning how many versions of Greg sit in all of our different tools around our company, you need AI, one, just to manage the volume of where you're going to get the biggest return for the buck. And then two, on moving on from your point around fuzzy logic, is how do you start using associative and transitive logic to deduce whether or not somebody is Greg Stewart? And that could be, hey, it's Greg S at Gmail on this one record, and it's Gregory.Stewart at MMA on this other record. I really wouldn't be able to use fuzzy logic for that. But as I go a step deeper, I see they're both located in Carson, California. That's interesting. And now when I look at, a device ID, oh, maybe they've shared a device ID at some point in time. Or maybe I can see through some transitive match that he's in a household with someone that has a device ID that ladders up to an account that he's on the name of. And so, again, just as you think about the dimensions and the multiples of how do we actually start to aggregate and look at this data in a way that we can shape it semantically to give us a really good proof positive point that this is likely the same person. It gets quite complex to try to do in the old school way of writing rules or looking at fuzzy magic.
Okay. So, Barry, I think, I would assume most marketers can really understand the complexity of trying to get, to that issue and understand it. They probably face that sort of every day. But I guess the question I asked you, where are you guys in terms of like the confidence that AI really makes that better? Because we've got this other funny notion out there with AI about there being hallucinations. So I'm not really sure that plays into the stuff that you're doing, but how do you have some confidence, or how do you improve confidence, or what do you know about that today?
Yeah, well, for those of you that are watching this and not just listening to it, you can see this identity graph on the wall behind me. We love to nerd out on identity graphs. And the thing that's interesting, Greg, about your question is you can think about a business in terms of its customer data needs, I think on a sliding scale from 100% deterministic, meaning let's say I'm in a regulated
Yep.
industry and I'm doing financial reporting and I have no leeway in terms of whether, binary, this is or is not Greg. And then
Yep.
you can scale that through that spectrum down to, I'm doing circulars, in the local paper, or I'm sending out, media messages on TikTok, and your appetite, I suppose, for the probabilistic component of whether or not we think that this is Greg. And so quite often we'll have customers who use different data sets within Amperity, for example, to determine which use case they're trying to solve. Hey, for my my quarterly earnings call, I'm using this deterministic count on total number of customers, for example, that I'm reporting to the street. Whereas my marketing team might be using for net ads to the loyalty program, they're using a more probabilistic data set where they've got more leeway in terms of trying to cast a wider net. And so I think the nice thing is, again, using AI, you don't have to box yourself into one decision, and instead you can ensure that you shape the data to match the use case or to match the value statement that you're trying to manage to.
Yeah, I think of that as an aperture problem where you're trying to decide how many people you let in or not let in. And you have to have a much tighter aperture when you have a highly regulated one and you need great certainty. And then you can have a looser one in other cases. But it's interesting. Your approach then is really much more flexible, which is letting AI have, or maybe define the use cases and letting AI have more flexibility. But there are still some issues I've seen with bias show up. For example, a very common one that I've saw just in the last 2 years was how often some of the probabilistic um, methods were having a systemic bias with Asian Americans. The Asianicity variable was a problem because you're more likely to have the last name of Lee, for example. And I saw a lot of I won't say whose data set that I saw, but I saw a bunch of the data all getting grouped together. The other one that's a common one is the apartment building issue, which is they all look like they live in the same area, might even have the same address and just different A, B, C, D or whatever, but those oftentimes would get grouped together. And that has systematic bias towards lower income because they're far more likely to live in that type of setting. Have you had any breakthroughs with that, or is that just kind of a known issue that we have to accept that it's not going to be perfect, but let's not let perfect get in the way of good?
I think in some ways, yeah, it could be a question of like, what's the tolerance level that we're willing to live with here? But I think the other thing is, when we're using a really rich, sort of robust set of AI to comb through this data, we have so much other signal than the things that traditionally give us hallucination or bias problems. Meaning, when we start looking at all of the data, for example, we have two people with a last name Lee, and maybe the same first name too, and maybe their email addresses are even fairly close. When we start looking at things like buying behavior, hey, where is this person transacted and how often? Does their pattern matching around how they transact look similar? One only exclusively buys online. One does a hybrid of online and in store. Like, we can really use a lot of signal to help us remove that bias and drive the accuracy. I think historically, Rex, we've always been subject, unfortunately, to match, merge, and fuzzy logic, to your earlier point, which is we're really writing rules to look at names and email addresses. That's pretty much it. And when you start to look across the richness of a landscape of the type of customers that we work with, they have a lot of signal. When you think about the source systems we're talking about, support systems and mobile and web tools and in-store behaviors and all of these sorts of different things, it really gives us a really rich view and a likelihood of who someone is, maybe without even using name or email address. We may have a 100% confidence interval on someone and never have even looked at the name or the email address.
Barry, this is kind of interesting because it really is, I think all of this falls under the category, how do we better know our customer, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to get to in sort of whatever experience we have. I guess the question I kind of have for you, what is the state of marketers or marketing, in your opinion, given you look under the hood with some of these companies? Like, I don't know, I'd know from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're really like at a point where like, oh my God, we really got to crack the code and fix this because we're moving into a different world? Like, what's the cycle? I think in part my question is kind of like, where are we today versus maybe where we were 5 years ago and what's happening?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Greg. I know you and I have kind of spoken about this in the past. The way I kind of look at it from a marketer's lens, I suppose, is the lights have been continually getting dimmer in the room. And we haven't noticed because they get so subtly dimmer every day. And so you can imagine we just start squinting more. We turn the brightness up on our machine, but eventually the light goes off, and then we're like, "Oh, I guess I have a problem. I need to change the light bulb or call the
And, and
electrical company."
what's that reduction in light? Is that sort of, is
Yeah,
that cookie deprecation and
it's
those
cookie.
kinds of issues that you're talking about, or privacy sort of playing a role in sort of restricting, or Apple sort of, don't track? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, it's 100% the efficacy of, in this case, our digital marketing. Given that we've been so dependent on the cookie for so long, it's really just the Chrome browser now that supports the cookie. They have 40% market share, and so that light has been dimming. When Safari turned
Yeah.
it off, when Apple decided to
Yep.
make some changes, and that robustness and the trustability and the accuracy of that cookie universe has continually gotten dimmer. And with Google finally putting the deprecation date later this year for all of cookies in
Yep.
Chrome, that's when the light's going to go out. And so I think we've seen this evidence. This dimming has really been evidenced in our ROAS is going down, but just a little bit each month. Our match rates are going down, but a little bit each month. The efficacy of our acquisition spend is going down. Our loyalty efforts are going down, but it's been incremental. And when we finally go off the cookie, we'll find that we have this precipitous drop. And so I think what you're seeing, to your question, is most companies are now embracing a first-party data strategy, right? The first-party data is the data that the brand or the
Mm-hmm.
company is collecting from the customer directly, and not having to rely on some third party tracking us around the internet. And it's great for a couple of reasons. Just to hit on your question, one, if I know Rex is a really great customer of mine, when I think about going out and finding new customers, rather than just throwing darts at the wall and say, "Hey, show me, people that are 30 to 40 years old that live in this zip code and make this much money." Instead, I can go out and look for people that look just like Rex, and that's really helpful in terms of the efficacy of my spend, and finding customers right out of the gate who are much more likely to want to be good, loyal, long-term customers for me. So I'm being really specific and using a scalpel here instead of a hammer when I think about acquisition. Secondly, if Rex is a great customer, when I go out there, I want to do a couple of things when I start talking to prospective customers or existing customers. One, I want to suppress Rex from that outreach because he's already a great customer. There's nothing worse than continually getting spam from brands that we already reward with our hard-earned money. And it just shows us as consumers that they have no idea who we are, number one. Number two, he's probably not the right person to send a 25% discount to if he just bought the same product a week ago. And/or he's a really high-tier loyalty customer of ours, and price and a little more price elasticity with him in terms of his sensitivity, and he's willing to pay full price for items because he's such a fan of the brand. Versus maybe Greg, who you bought once in the last 2 years, and we need to entice you back. So just using things like I know Rex is a great customer offers me a bunch of new strategies that are really high value, high accuracy, and have a really high rate of return.
Yeah, listen, Rex is rich enough. You don't need to discount for him. I don't think that's necessary at all. You know what it kind of feels like, Barry? What you're saying is, in some regards, is that we're getting to sort of we're eking into slow customer oblivion. Like we're just becoming. It's like customer amnesia is where we're going towards, and we're not even seeing it coming.
Yeah, I think that's right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rex.
So maybe just asking a question though, because I am interested in how the bridge between the first party data, because if I'm on your website specifically, and then of course, and I've logged in, of course you know who I am. That's really clear. But as I'm looking at how Google's talking about potentially doing the same type of relay that Apple's doing, and IP address disappears. If I don't log in, then how do you know who I am? One, and if I'm on a third party site and you do want to send a message to me, how do you do that if you have a first party relationship, but the IP address is going through a VPN or a relay that these both have set? There's no cookie. The user agent is scrambled. What becomes the hooks that still lets you see who I am, and does AI play a role in that, or is that just more server to server integrations that we have to do to keep the relationship connected?
Yeah, it's more of the latter, and there are limitations, right? As we put these various walls up in terms of consent and privacy, and they're healthy and they're great. And I think what you're finding are brands, instead of trying to go and solve for a really difficult edge use case, is instead they're embracing that first party data they already have, and then they're leveraging the walled gardens, given that the walled gardens know that Rex and Greg are really closely aligned in terms of who they are, how they buy, all those sorts of things. And so let's use them for what they're great at. And I'm going to send them, an audience and say, hey, find me like-minded people here, and they'll suppress Rex and they'll go find me Greg. That's an easier way actually of solving to get to Greg than trying to unwind or backwards engineer through all of these privacy walls of trying to get to Greg. Now, in your question, Rex, if we have session IDs and we have things that are non-identifiable, we can still store those and use the AI to better understand how often does that happen, what are the characteristics of those sessions, and therefore, do we have a better theory of the crime in terms of what kind of person this is and the best way to engage them? So there are still
Yeah.
things the AI can do for sure.
And that's where I was going because in many ways it's interesting. Number one is what you're describing of the world of essentially Apple and Google gaslighting of the world and changing the dimming and lighting slowly is that we really give a tremendous amount of power to the walled gardens because they do have a logged in access that they'll know who the user is. We potentially uh, you know reduce the amount of value to the open web where that isn't happening. But you have an interesting AI solution because you flipped the paradigm around and said, hey, we can still make a probabilistic estimation of at least what type of segment this person belongs to, if not the person it is, based upon maybe a pattern of activity, at least on that one website or at that time or being at a place. So it seems like there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope that there's going to be something in our future other than complete logged in walled garden, which is, again, Greg, you remember this, you were there too. That was like 1995 when we decided not to have everything be login and registered
Yep.
websites.
Yep.
So we're back there again, unless you can help us with your AI.
Yeah, that's right. And you could have this relation to this new, I think, Rex, you're describing elegantly, this kind of new potential relationship we have with an unknown customer, which is never something our goal has always been unknown to known, known to loyalty, and then move them up through the loyalty tiers. And we know that
Yep.
that equates to higher customer lifetime value, stickiness, retention, all those sorts of things. And so contemplating this idea that we might have a long-term healthy relationship with unknown customers is really exciting. And so if we think about someone who comes to the website, maybe transacts with us, never logs in, always checks out as a guest, but we still have that session information, we can start to put the pieces together. The AI can help us identify that this is the same person when they come back a month later, and you can even then start to extend that anonymized relationship to the other systems you have, such that, for example, let's say you call in for support, you have a problem, and the company has integrated this hashed version across all their systems. That support agent is going to say, "Hey, thanks so much for buying these 4 things over the last three months. Which one are you calling about?" And that's going to blow that person's mind. That one, that the company knows that much about them and is able to service and help them. And two, we got to do it in a way where it didn't infringe upon whatever that customer's version or view of privacy and consent happened to be, and we can respect that and not make it creepy. So I'm pretty excited about that part.
Hey, Barry, go back to the example we were talking about earlier before we kind of kicked off here and stuff. And you don't have to name the company, but the automotive example that you gave about how complex that relationship can be if there's if there's a warranty, if there's a loan, if there's service, if there's a mobile app. I mean, how many different? I want to make sure the audience is really clear for those especially who don't deal with this daily how hard that is to pull all that together in unification.
Yeah, I'll give you a simpler one
Okay.
first,
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
and then we'll do that one. So take, for example, a company who is really well known for their customer service. So we have a couple of customers that are like that. Nordstrom is one. Brooks Running
Yeah.
is another.
Yeah.
And in the case of Brooks Running, I'll kind of draft off this conversation that we're just having with Rex. Um, you know, Brooks Running, when they sell a pair of shoes, they can sell a pair of shoes online through their Brooks.com website, or it could be sold through someone like Dick's Sporting Goods, who's also a customer
Yep.
of ours. And the idea for Brooks is they want that data to flow through to every system they have. Melanie Allen, who's the CMO at Brooks, she really thinks of her job as delighting the customer, no matter where the customer is in that journey. So she doesn't look at her job as the CMO as bring more customers in the door and then hand them off to somebody and go find more customers. She really thinks holistically over the lifespan of a customer at Brooks, that her job is to delight and keep that customer. And so she's a really great champion for ours. And on this customer service point, she was awesome in getting this single view of the customer deployed across every system at Brooks. And when she finally did the piece with the customer center and the contact support teams, she sent us some really nice quotes from the customer service reps themselves. And so someone would call into the support team, and the person answering the phone, the customer support rep would say, "Hey, Greg, thanks so much for calling. Looks like you bought 2 pairs of shoes last week, size 11 and 11 and a half. You returned the 11 and a half. You're probably calling to see where your refund is." And you'd be like, "Yeah, that's exactly why I'm calling."
Yeah.
And so
Oh my
say,
God,
I see it's going to hit.
I would
Yeah,
love
it's
that
going to hit your
experience.
car.
Like, I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to get even better because they'll say it's integrated with their finance systems as well, because we have that single view of the customer across all of these appliances, remember? And they can say, without handing you off to someone or putting you on hold, they can say, "Greg, that's going to hit your card on Wednesday." Now, let me ask you, you had a question on sizing there. Did we get it wrong? Is there someone that I could push you through that knows about that particular running line? And so they've taken potentially what was a negatively fueled experience, right, with driving you to call, "Where's my money?" and satisfied you right out of the gate, and potentially turn this into an opportunity to delight you even further, maybe an upsell or to get you onto the right product. And so Melanie sent these quotes to us from the customer service reps. They're using their support tool, Zendesk, and they're seeing all of this within Zendesk. So the customer support rep doesn't know anything about Amperity. And the quotes from the CSRs were, "I'm closing cases before the customer can fully explain what the problem is."
Oh my God.
And you can imagine, these are not the, I mean,
I think
I
I
can't
just
imagine
fell.
this is
I
the
think I
most
just fell in
exciting
love.
job. I
The
know.
most frustrating
These,
experience, though, you nailed it, which is,
It's the
a
most
business
fucking.
that doesn't know us. And I know people, a lot of the privacy stuff, but there is important, and I don't want to
I,
just call it privacy stuff, but it's
I,
so frustrating not to have that when you just want to get an answer and they don't know what you think is the company should know given all the transactions and engagement you have with them. So I think that's a wonderful case study.
And Rex, I'm going to get really off track with that one. Listen, I had this conversation earlier today with somebody. I am really tired of other companies dictating my privacy settings for me. It's not Apple's role in that. Get out of it. Knock it off. I will dictate how much I want you to know or not know about me. So, and I do want you to know. I don't have a huge amount of sensitivity to that. I want to be taken care of. I'm busy. I have a lot of stuff to do. I just need the problems to be solved.
yeah,
And Barry,
I think
that's
you're
really
right.
what you get.
Especially with,
You're setting the framework to do that.
yeah, and especially for those brands that we really love and trust. We would love
Yes.
for them to
Yeah.
service us better, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing I really loved about that story when Melanie shared it was I hadn't really thought about the employee angle. And it turns out, when you think about any company, we're all trying to do a good job on behalf of the customer. And when you give us the tools to go do that, man, you've just created an incredibly, exceptionally happy employee.
Oh my
And
God,
you
I
think
didn't even
about
think about that. You're
yeah,
right.
think about a job like customer service. Like you're getting yelled at all day. People are generally not calling to thank you. And
Yeah.
so delighting those folks is a really cool, benefit I hadn't thought about.
I'm frustrated and annoyed because you can't solve my problem or you've not been given the tools to solve my. I mean, listen, I don't blame the customer reps. I try to be easy on them, but I'm very clear with the company. Like, listen, this is your fault. Don't. I hate when they send me the survey and they want me to attack the customer rep, and I always write back on those in the open-ended questions and say, this you're not helping them. Don't make them look like idiots, please. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and identity is the most important issue because you're right. Our identities have become so fragmented, and being able to pull that together is important. And I do think I want to talk more about as you've thought about AI and where you see it going next.
Yeah.
What are the most important priorities, especially as you look at more deprecation of identifiers? What's your next move with AI to try to help keep that? At least, even if it's not like I'm going to connect this back to your stable ID for the person, even if it's like I'm going to create, this identity of the session ID or understand what's going on there, or maybe you can connect it back in. What's your thought about what you do
Wait,
next with it as identifiers
can,
go more
can I
away?
can I double down on Rex's question, which I think is where he's going? Is like, what is the next big development here? In some regards, like, listen, we happen to be recording this in the day that ChatGPT just came out with Sorrow, which just sounds revolution. I mean, the leaps and bounds that generative AI is making right now are astonishing. It's the
Yeah.
most interesting time. Is that happening in the areas that you deal with, Barry, too, for Amperity?
Yeah, two things. So, Greg, I'll just
Go.
answer your question earlier around the automotive example. I won't go into detail so
Yep.
we can
Okay.
get to
Yep.
this
Go.
AI question. But you can imagine, I'm sure if we asked the folks at Brooks, they would say they have a pretty complex environment. Running a company of that size is hard. And your observation around a customer that's also one of our favorites, one of the biggest automotive manufacturers in the world. You think about the complexity they have, which is not just their internal systems, but 27 sub brands that all run fairly independently, a dealer
Yep.
network that has historically thought of the customer as their customer, not the
Yep.
not the manufacturer's
Totally.
customer, and so there's a reluctance to share too much
Mm-hmm.
data about that
Mm-hmm.
customer. And then you think about a lot of these automotive manufacturers following in the footsteps of Tesla, right? And trying to create
Yep.
direct to consumer relationships now through their EV businesses,
Yep.
through subscription based services in the car. And so it creates, a lot of them have very large financial businesses as well to manage loans and leases. So lots of different versions of the customer. And it just gets, incrementally more impossible, you would think, to create a single view that can hydrate that nice little outlet that everybody at the company could use. But we're doing it. And so
Yep.
it doesn't matter how complex or funky it gets. In some cases, the more complex, the better, because that's
Yep.
really where you can really wave the magic wand and really delight folks. So
Got it. Got it. Okay.
just
So,
wanted to close on that.
what's that future look like, Barry? What do you think? What is next? Are we going to see leaps and bounds in this area as we've seen? I mean, listen. I don't know. You're going to say cookie deprecation. So what? Who cares? Amperity's got it solved. I don't know. Where where
Yeah.
we going?
So I think there's a couple of things in this one, and we could probably spend a few hours just on this one question. I think in terms of we're seeing a generational reboot of the MarTech and ad tech landscape as a result of cookie. And so, think about first party data onboarding, something that we haven't done as a community of marketers because we haven't had to. And so I think there's a big shift now where most companies are going to start onboarding off their first party data, as we've just talked about, and they're going to see incredible returns on that. They're going to see their ROAS go through the roof. They're going to see match rates get into the 90+% range when they're in the 40s or 50s right now. I mean, they're going to see unbelievable results with their existing paid media budgets while still working really nicely with the walled gardens. And so I think we're going to see that, and it's going to be fantastic as customers. It's going to be fantastic for our brands in terms of those marketing teams and their ability to demonstrate real value to their business in terms of their efforts to retain and grow customers as well as go find new ones. To this question around where are we going on AI, on the one hand, I think, oh my gosh, thank goodness for AI because we wouldn't have a business because this problem is really impossible to solve without AI. And that's the heart of our company. And I think about the use cases we're seeing, especially in the marketing team dynamic right now around AI. And I kind of look at it in the same way that I might look at, I don't know, predictive analytics, or even to our very opening discussion around the outlet, some of these marketing automation tools, in that AI is wonderful and it happens to be an incredible amplifier of the quality of the data that you have and you are feeding it and training it on. Meaning, if the data quality is low, you have terrible results with your AI projects. If the AI is able to learn off of hydrated, trustable data that's in a state that it can really build value off of, then you find that everything you plug into that AI outlet seems to spin itself into gold, whether that's content, whether that's predictive capabilities, whether that's customer service at scale, whether that's bots, and all of the other things we know about call center and things that we're doing with AI there. But again, it kind of comes back to the first principles of you have to train a large language model, and it has to have some data in order to go do that. And so, luckily, when you kind of pair something like an Amperity with an OpenAI, GPT 4.0 API, man, lots of magical things happen.
Great.
So, as you're thinking about the next steps and the future of AI, what would you say, to flip the question around, that you'd see as the most overhyped area right now, or maybe an area that you think is sort of a waste of time for people?
I don't think anything is a waste of time because I think, to Greg, your point, like it's going so quickly
So
that anything
fast.
that we dream of today will probably be here tomorrow. Like maybe not
Hmm.
tomorrow, but it's going to be here relatively soon. And so I don't think anything is necessarily a waste of time. I would caution, however, with our expectations around value for those investments. Meaning, I think everything is a worthwhile experiment. Everything is a worthwhile set of learnings. But I think attaching, for example, a growth target to our acquisition budget, or some retention numbers on our loyalty program is hard right now because we haven't seen that quality and consistency in the output to go drive those sorts of things. So I would say, in some ways, one, I think we're checking down now from things that are really hard, like mass personalization at scale, right? Like, how do we have these natural language, intimate relationships with our customers that are driven purely by AI?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a waste of time. I think that's a great sort of North Star. And I think what we're checking down to is, how do we augment our already incredible human employees with great AI so they can go and deliver those experiences for our customers? And I think that's a totally
Yeah.
worthwhile and achievable outcome in the next months and quarters, and we're already seeing evidence of that. And then lastly, I'd say, Greg, to your question, what are the bite-sized easy wins that we can get using AI today? And certainly, I think we're seeing people deploy AI towards marketing content and copy. We're seeing them, try to triage first-line service calls and things of that nature. I think that's wonderful. That's great. Those things are beneficial. They save money. They do all the things that they say they do on the box. And so I think we're going to kind of hopscotch our way from nice bite-sized easy wins to how do we augment our humans to do a better job of the job that they really want to do well and are equipped to do well. And then I think the North Star of incrementally, and who knows whether that's a year or 10 years from now, where we truly have AI delivered experiences that need no sort of human governance or administration, and we're totally willing to trust that customer, that very precious customer relationship, to technology only.
Very interesting. Barry, I think you kind of brought us right back to where we started here when we mentioned that, listen, this is the underlying sort of value of customer experience. It is without question the best of the marketing strategies. It's where the world's going. In fact, the CMO of the company that we didn't mention earlier, I actually said to her at one point, I said, I think my job, the job of the MMA, is to take all those brand marketers and move them to customer experience marketers. And she said, that's my journey.
Mm,
So I think
absolutely.
that's where we're going, and anything we can do, we've just started on that. I think there's so many more questions that come up. Listen, Rex and I can't thank you enough for doing this. We appreciate it. Appreciate your sort of help with the MMA. I don't know. Let's go solve this for marketers.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
thanks
think
to you both, and I really appreciate you just pushing all of us. You do a great job, not just pushing the industry forward, but all of us, including suppliers and vendors, and those of us trying to construct the technology. So I appreciate you. You hold us all equally high to a high bar, and keep pushing. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Well, right on. Well, that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to listen to more episodes, subscribe, follow, rate, and review in your favorite podcast app.